So our students have come up with some provocative visions of the future that they're willing to bet all their money on. All right? So the first of them, right here. All right. Introduce yourself and tell us why we should believe in this.
Okay. My name is Jackie Dielstra. I'm a second-year student here at the Fletcher School, and I worked with Megan Mahoney, another student here at Fletcher, to think about what we're referring to as private, tangible systems of exchange. So within this, try to imagine, if you can, that the US dollar is no longer almighty, it's not totally trustworthy, its value has collapsed. Okay, maybe that's not so difficult to imagine during today's economic crisis. So what could happen? Without people trusting in the national currency, they can decide they're going to create their own currency. This, for example, has already happened in the city of Ithaca, New York, where they have Ithaca hours. And it's a currency that, instead of floating up and down in value with the economy, it's pegged to what they refer to as the living wage, an hour of the living wage that they see. So they would say that with this currency, people would always still be making a fair wage, and it won't have the same fluctuation that we see in the economy. So it's one example of what could happen. Or maybe imagine, which is maybe harder to do, that the red team won the debate, and that currency is gone. We have no more cash. So what could happen there? Maybe in Honduras, a rogue NGO decides, they hear from their communities, that people aren't really happy with this. They still want to feel the currency in their hands. They want to be able to conduct transactions in their community with cash, so they decide they're going to create their own currency for that community. And this way, people can continue to do that. We see perhaps we'd have another alternative currency that would pop up. Our last thing that could happen that we thought about would be maybe because of political crisis, natural disaster, something we thought about earlier is the cell phone network goes down and there's no cash because it's gone. So what would happen in this time while the cell phone network's down? Maybe people look around, they see all that they have. They have their goats, they have chickens, they have peanuts. They decide, well, we're going to return to a barter system so we can keep up economic activity while the cell phone network's down. So, and then what happens when the network goes back up? People say, well, I'm just going to go back to the ECAS system, or they think to themselves, you know, I don't really trust this E-system. It went down, it was gone for a while. Maybe they decide they'll just stick with the barter system and as something that they find more trustworthy and that they have more control over, and then also opt out of this E-system.
Wonderful. We have another vision.
Okay, my vision is of a world where currency is private.
Elizabeth, who are you?
Oh, my name is Elizabeth Burgess. I'm a student here at Fletcher. I'm in the first year. I'm studying development economics and international business. So this is my vision of the future. I think that we have a lot of indicators that currency could very well become privatized. We already know that currency has been virtualized with credit cards, the internet, near-field communications technologies, mobile payments. But we also see a lot of examples of privatization already. One is online gamers who use currencies within these massive multiplayer online games, and they trade currency on real exchange platforms in the real world. So the World Bank recently estimated that gold farmers, who are people who work in computer labs creating avatars and weapons in World of Warcraft, are generating $3.3 billion for developing countries. And I think that once these currencies continue to spill out of the sandbox of games and into real life, there'll be more opportunities to spend it on real life things. Another example of private currency are just the expansion of membership and loyalty reward programs. Airline mileage can purchase so much more than just a plane trip today. And then we have the social networks, which got cut off on the bottom of my slide here. Facebook has its credits, which you can now buy at 7-Eleven, even if you're an unbanked customer with cash. You can play Farmville, again, without buying with a credit card. You can buy with cash, but play online. And then there are cases of social networks like Mixit in South Africa that has moolah currency, where you can use it to buy airtime, you can buy many things, and it's increasingly spilling out into kind of real-world everyday purchases. So I'm not sure I envision a future where my credit card is denominated in Facebook credits, but I do think that social networks will start interacting with private virtual currencies and creating more opportunities for spending outside of government-issued dollars and currency.
Excellent. All right.
Hi, my name is Jenny Heinz, and it's no longer April 2011. It's actually April 2020. And I'm the chairman of the U.S. Federal Reserve. 9 years ago, I was a mauled candidate at Fletcher, but today I'm the youngest chairman of the U.S. Federal Reserve. And I'm going to tell you a little bit about my day today. So on my way to work, I took a cab, and I swiped my credit card on the machine in the cab to pay for my fare. I got out, I went to the Starbucks, I got my latte as usual, and I bumped my phone to the machine at the register to pay for my drink. Then I got to work, and my daughter called me and said that she hadn't gotten her allowance. So I texted her, and I sent her $15 by texting her. And then I left work. I walked past a homeless man at Foggy Bottom, and I decided I would give him $5, so I bumped my phone to his, and then he had $5. I was feeling charitable. And it was so easy, too. So you may ask why this scenario is different than what Elizabeth just told you about. Well, this is a scenario where all of those transactions are of no cost to the customer. And this is done by using that private innovation, all of these things that have come out of the private sector, right? Like bumped technology and credit cards and awesome smartphones. And we take those private innovations and we make them into public rails. This can happen through several different scenarios, including government subsidies and government regulation. But this needs to happen at no cost to the customer in order to ensure financial inclusion. And that's really what we're here today to talk about, right, is financial inclusion. So this needs to happen by investment from the government and not through private innovation, and not through private currencies, which Elizabeth was talking about, because those will always cost something, right? You're always giving money to Facebook when you buy their credits, but you're not exactly giving money to the U.S. government, and you will have more trust in the U.S. government. At least I do. So that's my scenario. I think it's a great.
Matt, bring us back to reality.
Okay, perfect. Well, I actually get the funnest job here because I get to say humbug to all of this. Now, who here has used an electronic transaction, whether it be a credit card, a debit card, bought something on eBay, I'd say in the last week? I have. Now, all of you with your hands up, who would use that if you couldn't guarantee that it was secure? Anybody? Would you run the risk? No? The issue with the electronic is fundamentally that while it's the theme of the day, it's interesting, it's exciting, it's amazing, but at the same time, it's based on trust. It's based on something that's potentially transient. If you look at M-Pesa, for example, M-Pesa is loved and adored by consumers right now because they trust it. If for some reason you couldn't access your money, boom, it's done. And you wouldn't find mobile money come back to Kenya for a generation. The trust is evaporated out of that system. So when we're talking about a return to a public, tangible currency, we're not talking about the need for some sort of catastrophic war or massive depression. It can be something simple. As more and more transactions go across electronic rails, more and more criminal organizations are going to be interested in getting in there, in cracking that. So in 2020, imagine this. You have Anonymous that's morphed, Anonymous, the online organization, that's morphed from simply being a mild nuisance and occasionally going after Scientologists to being an organization that's much more interested in transparency, that's much more interested in pushing a specific agenda. And they target and they break the encryption technology that allows all electronic transactions to be secure. And they say in 24 hours we're gonna publish that. Very quickly you have trust completely disappear from the electronic realm. Very quickly you have people move their money out of Facebook credits, move their money out of their e-bank accounts, cut up their credit cards, and what they want now is cash. And not just cash, they want gold. They want to be assured that the money that they have in their pocket is not simply, pretty bits of paper, but it's actually backed up by something. Now, this might be a stretch if you look at everything else that's been said at the conference today, but I think very much in an instant, you can move from the 21st century economy back to one that looks much more akin to what you saw in 1940, if not before. So that's the humbug 2020 right there.
So what we've got is 4 scenarios that were painted for you by our students. And these 2 experts are going to place an amoeba that represents their best prediction on where we are going to be on this space. So essentially, these are the 4 vignettes that you saw. And Claire and David, where do you think we're going to go? Claire?
I mean, I think it's very, very difficult task.
Oh, come on.
No, it's a very, very difficult task because at the end of the day, it really sort of, for me, goes back to how you actually define, for example, some of the different roles. Mm-hmm. So I was very interested in the public-private sort of discussion about how how to actually really sketch out that dimension. Because in a way, for me, this raises the role of the private sector, of the public sector, the multiplicity of these roles. So if I look at government, for example, they can play the role as regulators, which we've discussed a lot today. They can play the role as well as sort of coordinator, maybe to inspire sort of the private sector to do sort of certain things. They can play the role, I think, which was just raised as investors, or should they actually just, by being regulator, set the rules for those investments to be made by someone else? So I think there is a extremely rich picture which goes beyond those sort of 4 elements, those 4 sort of boxes. And this is why I'm going to say, well, I can't choose, really.
Okay. All right. So your amoeba is kind of straddling. You want to?
Bit here.
Yeah, right over here. So Claire's amoeba is. Does it have tentacles reaching in any particular direction?
Yeah, we like tentacles.
Yeah.
Yes. I mean, I think it really goes back to your point about sort of, it's the complexity of sort of the system. I think today's system is already very complex, and in 8 years' time, which is indeed not sort of that far away, it's going to be even more complex. And maybe one more point is that, I mean, for me, whether it's sort of tangible or virtual is actually always about sort of where you put the trust. Because in a way, you might be very at ease with just a virtual environment if you can actually have multiple touch points where you actually get access your data. So then sort of that's fine. Tangible, well, I mean, those notes that we may be able indeed to carry in our pockets, well, we indeed trust them, but then it's not because sort of it's paper, but we have faith that we can get sort of gold maybe sort of back. So I think it sort of really plays back, so that's why I like this kind of very tentacular picture.
So you heard the captain of the former captain of the Killing Cash team as the first lieutenant of the same team. This is a totally loaded deck here.
It is.
David.
Yes. Well, building on Claire's comments, which have a lot to do with defining where those axes sit, I was involved in an exercise a few years ago looking at the futures of branchless banking 10 years out. And that required us to take some views on some of the dynamics which are captured here. And so the one thing that to me is clear in terms of where I sit would be that these forces pushing the electronicization of the payment space are extremely strong, and they are unlikely to reverse. So if you think about the visions we heard on the left-hand side, the kind of tangible world, they all were associated with some degree of disruption or collapse. Right now, those are always, you can never give those a zero probability. Japan might have given those sort of things a zero probability, and look what's happened there. So my amoeba would have to hang out with a preponderance on the virtual side of the spectrum, because I think the underlying forces are very strong, and I think they're unlikely to reverse in most circumstances other than the quasi-catastrophic in terms of the effect on trust and on infrastructure like electricity, things like that drive the virtual world. In terms of then the up-down axis, as I said, that really does need to, as Claire said, be defined more clearly. But if we frame the question as being, where will we get the most traction for inclusion from? My own amoeba would be weighted towards the bottom right-hand corner. So if
Yeah, you can draw your own.
I can draw my own. No,
your amoeba has to be a different color.
I've got a white
And we
amoeba.
only have white as the alternative.
No, you have green, actually.
Oh, we do? Excellent.
More choice.
Never let it be said that Fletcher's short of chalk. Huh? The real one. All right, so, it would look something like that, and a lot would rest on the definition of what we mean here. So the last session was about government as a payer. And we heard about how powerful that can be, although difficult, if government as the payer starts to drive things towards the electronic world. It can reduce the cost to all participants in the system, but not necessarily so. In Mexico, the jury is not in yet on that. Government as owner, I think our Federal Reserve Chairman, whoever she is, the youngest in, oh, there we are, posited an ownership of payment systems. For me, the thing about this corner is to say, I don't see us getting into a world of financial inclusion here unless two things happen. The one is every person has an electronic store of value. So the question is, who will issue those stores of value? And the second is, unless we all have access to immediate payment instruments. I don't see immediate payment instruments being pervasive unless there is some publicly provided switching infrastructure at the heart of the system. So that's why, for me, Pascal, my amoeba is growing in that direction, as amoebas tend to do.
As amoebas tend to do.
Yes.